How likely is it that the U.S. replaces Volodymyr Zelensky of the Ukraine in the first half of the next year? This is authored by Andrew Korybko via Substack. President Putin shared his view during a press conference in Hanoi that the U.S. will replace Zelensky during the first half of next year after they use him to make unpopular decisions such as further lowering the draft age. His prediction coincided with Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service publishing its latest such report about the scenario, which claims that Zelensky is being seriously considered by the U.S. as his replacement and is also deemed to be more suitable for negotiating peace with Moscow than others. And it was explained last month how Russia hopes to influence Ukraine's possible impending US-backed regime change process after that same service released a related report about this at the time. This strategy continues unfolding, as evidenced by President Putin declaring just 2 weeks ago that the Rada speaker is now the legitimate leader of Ukraine if the constitution is still being followed of the country of Ukraine, which means Zelensky is no longer in power. And if the constitution is still being followed, accordingly, he said that Russia could negotiate with him or someone else if Kiev is interested in peace, but not Zelensky, because Zelensky is no longer the legitimate leader. Now, the West could ditch Zelensky early next year, Putin said. Now, as regards the conflict's military strategic dynamics, they could continue trending in Russia's favor and won't be changed by minor adjustments to U.S. policies such as letting Ukraine use its arms to hit any targets across the border they're allegedly planning to cross the frontier. The only variable that can make a meaningful difference, the variable at this point in timing, is of NATO stages. If NATO stages a conventional intervention, but that would spoke the risk of World War III by miscalculation. And returning back to President Putin's prediction about Zelensky being replaced in the first half of next year, he's either assuming that no such the conventional intervention will occur by NATO, or that the subsequent escalation would remain manageable instead of spiraling into an apocalypse. Now, regarding the first possibility, there's a chance that this won't happen since it's dependent on Russia achieving a military breakthrough across the front lines, which NATO could then exploit to justify directly involving itself in this conflict. That might either not happen and thus rule out the scenario, or it'll unfold and then set that sequence of events into motion, therefore leading to the second possibility of them managing this escalation. In that case, Russia might either issue striking NATO units so long as they don't cross the Dnieper and pose a credible threat to its new regions, or they'll engage in controlling tit-for-tat strikes before freezing the conflict. No matter what happens, however, Zelensky's political future is set in stone. The first possibility is actually much worse for him, since he'll be pressured like never before to lower the draft age as soon as possible in order to replace all the meat that will have been ground to prevent the Russian breakthrough across the front lines. It's impossible to predict the timing with which he'd then be replaced, since it depends on when that policy is implemented and whether and how long the secret police can control the public's furious reaction to sending their young adult males into the slaughter. Now, if NATO conventionally intervenes in Ukraine, but the escalation does not spiral into World War III by miscalculation, which of course cannot be taken for granted, then the bloc might keep Zelensky in place until they reach a deal with Russia for comprehensively managing Europe's new normal, quote unquote. And once that's achieved, whenever it may be, he'll then be pushed aside in order to herald the coming of the so-called new Ukraine, quote unquote, under these new circumstances that turn the page on this dark period. Just like in the first possibility, he'd only remain in power long enough to make unpopular decisions, albeit under totally different circumstances in that case. Nevertheless, the writing is on the wall, and his political career is drawing to a close either way. Zelensky his only use right now is to legitimize radical policies in either scenario, he'll then be cast aside once he's done what's needed of him, though it's unclear when that'll be, since everything depends on whether NATO conventionally intervenes. I think that would even be the end of NATO, my humble opinion. And this is on Zero Hedge by Tyler Durden. This is authored by Andrew Korybko via Substack. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.